Go.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology. How are you, Theo?
No, I'm very well, Andy. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good. And actually, we're going to jump straight in because just before we actually started this, Theo decided to share that he's got a theory about Brexit. And I didn't want to hear it beforehand, not to preempt me or preempt my decision making on this. So let's hear it straight off. This is the first time I'm hearing it as well. What's your theory?
Well, it's based on psychology. And you and I have talked a lot about the social divide, the division between the haves and have-nots, so that 90% of wealth is held by 10% of the people, and that's the Pareto principle. Now, people have researched how you can make things more equal, and nothing makes things more equal. No left-wing governments, no right-wing governments. The only thing that does is complete catastrophe, i.e. you reset it to ground zero, such as war, such as famine, such as earthquake, natural disaster. That's what resets it. Yeah. Disease. That's what resets it to ground zero.
But wasn't that Maslow's theory, though? I think Maslow came up with that.
I'm not sure, but it occurred to me that maybe people are trying to cause maximum chaos right now and make everything collapse so that a new order can rise up out of the dust. For instance, why is Labour being so inept and quiet? Maybe they're all hoping that out of the ashes will rise a Marxist government led by Jeremy Corbyn. I don't know, but it occurred to me that where you cause maximum chaos, you have the optimal environment to cause massive change. So this is my theory. This is why Brexit could be handled so incredibly poorly. It's because some people are trying to maximize the chaos in order to cause the biggest changes down the line.
Okay. Well, I think, firstly, let's touch on Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, the guy is totally inept, and the thing is, that's why he's not. He's actually, before he was worryingly, today he's worryingly electable, whereas before he was unelectable, totally unelectable, and I don't think anybody had any issues with him. And we've covered this before. The thing is, and we talked about something called variable change, where you bring someone else into the equation, it changes the dynamics of how people perceive them. It's known as optics, isn't it? Political optics. To be more expressive on that. But the thing is, you got someone like Theresa May who hasn't really delivered. She hasn't shown any real character. She's been very compliant, which is not really what you want as a leader. And at the end of the day, she was a Remainer, so her incentive was never really to actually get the best deal out of Europe. Her theory would have been just to let's keep a foot in Europe.
Like for instance, she says she's duty bound to deliver, but the fact is, you and I have talked at length about authenticity, and she can't authentically deliver a Brexit.
Yeah, but the thing is, what the public wants her to deliver, and in the model of her world, of what she wants to deliver as originally a Remainer, are waves apart in some ways. And
of course Corbyn is the Eurosceptic who's duty bound to oppose Theresa May's Brexit.
Anything, and it's ironic because it's happening in the States as well with the wall. But the thing is, you got some, and I said worryingly with Jeremy Corbyn right now is because of who Theresa May is. You got Jeremy Corbyn. I said he's been polished up a lot by his team, and they've actually done a very good job. They've changed his appearance, they've changed his suits, they've trimmed him up. He's even become a more charismatic speaker and things like this. But the thing is, all it does is just put a very superficial layer on what is a very dangerous ideology, which is incapable of delivering because it's never delivered. And but the thing is, and I think I've found as we've gone through this, Conservatives have become even more left-wing rather as opposed to right-wing. And one of the reasons why is because of the influence of Europe, which is very much looking to create this state-controlled European government in effect. So in some ways, the worst thing that's possibly happened is that we are coming out of Europe for them. Not so much for us in some ways. I think we're going to have some catastrophes over that, or we're going to go through some pain. But the thing is, there's nothing like what's actually happening in Europe overall. And if you actually had some other countries who came out of Europe, you could almost create like this two-tier type sort of trade agreement between the countries which are stronger economically and those which are less.
I completely agree, and I'm sure there'll be several countries quite willing to do that, and indeed they've already started talking about it, as you know.
Yeah.
So Italy, Poland, Portugal, those kind of countries are already talking about doing exactly that. So it's interesting times ahead. But again, what most people don't realise about the UK is that it trades more with the Commonwealth than it does with Europe. So quite frankly, the UK has absolutely nothing to worry about. And indeed, when the UK didn't join the euro, people worried that London was going to lose its centre as banking, and of course it never happened. So I think at the end of the day, the real reason why Brexit occurred was because national identity was being threatened, and because people didn't want to become a pseudo-Islamic backwater of Europe, and that's precisely what's going to happen to everyone else. Now, we also talked about a very interesting study, which looked at early life experiences, and I know you and I have talked about epigenetics. Now, nothing can change your chromosome structure, but you can add little chemical groups to it, and that will affect how your chromosomes are expressed, and that is the epigenetics. And that expression can last generations. So, for instance, different ways of behaving. For instance, if you're a warlike nation, you're much more likely to have more aggressive descendants, and so on. And a very, very interesting researcher talked about the fact that he first got into epigenetics when he talked to a very well-known professor who was looking at rats and mother rats and how mother rats licked their newborn, and you'd have a high licker and a low licker, and the high lickers tended to produce calmer, more functioning adults, and the low lickers would produce more anxious and less well functioning adults. And of course, he said perhaps that's reflected in the human population. In other words, if you're not looked after and groomed properly by your mother, then you become more anxious, and you'll want to eat more. So he said perhaps there's a certain survival functionality, because if things are very unsettled and uncertain, then the mother's going to give you less attention, and therefore you'll grow up more anxious and wanting to eat more, let's say. And nowadays, of course, it's counting against us, because through our uncertain times, we're beginning to grow up and we're wanting to eat more, but of course we're faced with fast food and all the instant gratification. And he said perhaps that's why so many people are putting on weight, because they're not looked after and they're not groomed properly by their mothers, because they have to go out to work and they don't look after the kids.
Millennials seem to be a lot more conscious about what they eat, and there's a big thing I've been hearing about vegan diets, I suppose, which is very becoming, every sort of article I've been reading, which is
another symptom of anxiety, isn't it?
But
the more you're obsessed, the more anxious you are.
I've got this theory about epigenetics, actually, because, and just to sort of make it a sort of a simpler explanation rather than actually having the doctor's version, is really sort of saying that if you imagine your computer, your DNA is your hardware and the epigenetics is the software. And someone else actually once explained it. It's almost like you have a paragraph of words, and the writing doesn't change. But all of a sudden, what the epigenetics does is you put the commas and full stops in different places.
Nice.
Which then actually makes it read very differently. And this gets passed on to our children, onto our grandchildren, onto our children, and it goes on further down the line. So if you suffer from depression today, you will actually pass that on to your children's children. So 4 generations down the line, ongoing, it'll have that knock-on effect, like a dominoes effect, where they actually have that.
Yes.
So in terms of, I've got this theory that what is the right, it's looking to identify what is the right age to actually have kids, because let's face it, you don't want to have kids too young because you've got all the teenage baggage and crap you've got to go through, but you don't have it too late in life, because all of a sudden, even physically, and what you put in your body and what you eat and whether you smoke is going to actually impact the children. Because here's another example. You got 2 twins. One gets brought up in a circus, and the other one gets brought up in a very wealthy family, and one has better nutrition than the other. Even though they're identical, and I think they've done studies on this, over a period of time, it'll actually impact the level of height of what they grow at, or that it'll impact how they look, their features, their energy, their behaviors, their attitudes, all these sort of things from 2 people who've got an exact same DNA, but further on down the line, that will actually have there'll be certain characteristics about them that will change through that epigenetics process. That in turn then gets passed on their children, and there starts the whole line of who people are further on down in terms of their behaviours, in terms of their characters and things like this. Obviously, add that to the people that you actually marry, and that'll actually dilute certain areas. So when I spoke last week, and he comes up in conversation every time about Donald Trump, I said actually one of the reasons he actually got married to Ivana Trump was because I believe that he was very conscious about getting a strong DNA pool for his children. So he married someone who was attractive, like Ivana, I think she was a model.
Attractive and sporty.
She was attractive, yeah, but she was not just sporty, she was an Olympian. She was an Olympic skier. So having that...
Highly driven.
Yeah, so exactly. And there's a level of tenacity and mental toughness that goes along with that. So when you're actually looking to actually get someone for your kids, or if you want to produce kids out of that, then you really want to be, you don't really be going for the love, which is an emotional reaction, but going for a more rational reaction, which is probably not the best way to actually approach relationships. But going for the logical step, you actually you're looking to select someone who's actually going to provide you with an offspring that is strong, because it comes back to what you called natural selection.
I mean, you're so right. And as you say, looking at these twin studies where they're separated and they reach different heights according to their environments, they actually did that with the rats again. So they had genetically identical rats, and then they separated them from their mothers, gave them to different mothers, high lickers and low lickers.
Oh, right.
And the genetically identical rats became different adults in terms of their behavior and functionality because of the high lickers and low lickers. And the way that epigenetics, well, one of the ways it functions is simply by causing little chemical reactions on the DNA, so that the body, the way it has all its metabolic processes, including the way it breaks down substances, is it either removes little groups or adds little groups. And you can have sulfate groups or methyl groups, and epigenetics works a lot by adding methyl groups to the chromosomes, and that's called methylation. And indeed, the one theory is that that's how experiences are built up. So they looked at rats who were addicted to cocaine, and they found that if they gave them the cocaine in a certain situation, if they stopped giving them the cocaine, but then later on, in fact much later on, exposed them to the same situation, they started showing cocaine-seeking behavior. What they then did is they demethylated their chromosomes, and they found that it completely eradicated their cocaine-seeking behavior. So they said that the chemical basis by which we